Hello guys, today I'm reporting with the special part with Kassra here on my home couch.
Still as always.
Still as always, yes, we spent last week together. I think we've gotten to know each other well, including family. So we also had a great time, but I don't want to go into that too much because today it's about your life again, or in general, what does such a life look like? Of course, you can't speak for everyone.
Yes, that's all from the time for me in the charter. It's also charter specific. Every charter is different.
Exactly. So you don't claim to say I speak for or against in general, but it's always your view of things.
Exactly, yes.
I repeatedly emphasize that it's perhaps very important.
It's a shame. Having that for oneself should be a given. We constantly stress this, but for me, it's a matter of course.
Some people misunderstand and generalize the statement to everyone, which is not the case.
I understand that too.
That's very subjective, but about certain things we're going to talk about, this is the first time it's not scripted. But I have a few terms here that I want to address, so nothing gets left behind. The series before wasn't scripted either, we just started talking.
Exactly.
That's always a question that comes up, and in this special it's about, in case someone stumbles upon this, you were criminal in your youth, you then joined a support group of the Hells Angels, you were in the red light district. You were in jail as a teenager, then you moved from Hamburg to Berlin, became a Hells Angel there, then you got involved in a murder, the so-called expect betting office murder.
Exactly, 2014.
Exactly, you were legally convicted as a murderer.
Yes.
We already evaluated that in the first part. Then you became a key witness regulation. Now you live a new life, have reconsidered your life, started anew, and now you sit and, of course, try to enlighten people about what goes on in these milieus. So that you have a brief insight into who Kassra is, but most of you will then know Kassra now. Yes, first of all, I wanted to tell people now how should we imagine a day in the life of a Hells Angels. So what does that look like? Maybe we can differentiate a bit there. You've also sometimes mentioned Sunday being family day. But what does it look like during the week, and what does it look like on the weekend? And of course, how does a meeting go? That was a lot of input, but maybe you can give us some insight into that.
Not for me. I think it will be more input for the viewers. For me, it's everything. I just let it pass in review for you and the viewers, which I really like to do. Yes, as you said, yeah, you already mentioned it at the beginning. Very, very important. Everything is very subjective. And of course, also from this charter in which I was, which was very special. So yes, Berlin City, back then it was, depending on the status, it was actually always the same. One or more had to spend a little more time in the club. It was just like that. You got up in the morning, depending on relatively late, I would say, for an average Joe, maybe around noon. Then you got ready, checked your phone. Is there anything? Has something happened? Because this life is also always very, very stressful from any disputes in the criminal milieu, physically as well as verbally. And then there are always some things that need to be clarified or go somewhere, or you can come along or here, watch out there and so on. So, or any things that are pending, but there was nothing. If there was nothing or if there is nothing, then you check it or you don't check it, depending on the situation. Then you go out, get in your car, check your emails, depending on which business field you are in. In my case, I was mainly involved in the red light district. Now let's discuss the red light in the construction business. I went up, checked if the old lady, that's how you say it, the woman who is there in the shop for this activity is offering her services, if she is doing well. Oh, there's your little dog. And yes, one takes care.
I'm sorry, folks, but dogs are part of our lives.
Yeah, sure, everything's fine. It also shows how authentic everything is. Yeah, that's why everything's relaxed.
Someone is probably standing here right now. The mail is being delivered. He's definitely freaking out about everything.
Great alarm system. Check the situation by asking if she's at the store, if you should drive her, or if she's driving herself, and how the previous day went if you didn't pick her up the night before. There's a little exchange, then you get in the car. Usually you pick her up, then drive. So apart from the normal family, drive off to meet her, eat together, collect the money, and discuss the topics, including any events that occurred.
Is that the first question too? How much money was there?
Yes, of course. Everything else is superficial. How are you? Everything good? Yes, you? And how did it go yesterday? It's a business relationship, but definitely for the man. And then they eat brunch, or depending on what time it is, or have lunch, and they talk about how the day was. They usually talk about their customers, which is very stressful for the women. There are always various encounters that are not so nice.
So you take the time and listen.
Yes, of course.
You listen to what kind of customers were there, right?
So it was like that back then, yes.
Do you respond with words of encouragement like, hang in there, it's not that bad, or today will be better?
No, on the contrary, they are usually very clear-headed. People say, yes, he is sick. Oh, he is a sick pig. Or, oh, what is that, perverted? Then she says, yes, he is an idiot. He paid properly. Screw it. And she says, yes, sometimes it's like that. I have to take it, but whatever, it was worth it. That's always the case. Very ambivalent, depending on what happened. And then you talk about it, let it happen to you, which is quite disgusting at times. Yes, when you've exchanged ideas, you say, watch out. Should I drive you to work? Are you going yourself? And then she says, yes, no, you can drive me. And she gets in around 4 o'clock to 3, 4 o'clock. You drive her to the store, drop her off. I'll get in touch. Then that's done for now. In the meantime, you've already communicated with a club brother here and there. And then you drive directly to the clubhouse or the bar from there, depending on what was going on. I drove straight to the clubhouse.
You also said then you go to eat, go for brunch or something else, cook at home.
Yes, that didn't exist at all. That didn't happen. There was a kitchen that was never used, something like that.
The main thing is to be on the move.
Yes, my life partner did, but I didn't. For the little one and for herself, yes. And she did eat a lot, so there's that. I mean, you're just on the move, always on the move. And yes, then you just show up at the clubhouse, arrive, get out. It's full, usually bustling. Everyone, including the prospects, is present from a member's perspective. The prospects are there, the hangarounds are there, all the supporters, and that was the case with us too. It was also a catch basin. People truly lived it, being there every day. The clubhouse was always occupied 24/7. Attendance requirement for the applicants. The supporters had their own sleeping rooms, so they could really live there to some extent. The sergeant had an apartment on the property up on the 2nd floor. So it was very much built like a family that was done very consciously and also very homely. Everything was there, shower rooms, nice kitchen, lounge and party room, really. Everything was there to really live there for a longer time.
Who maintained such a house?
It was the prospects and the hangarounds. They took care of it, yes. And they had to do everything between clearing out and such. Hiring an external company for that is not advisable. If something goes missing and ends up on eBay classifieds or the internet, it would cause problems. And of course, the police. They would have the opportunity to go in, install eavesdropping technology.
Were you afraid of the eavesdropping technology?
Yes, very much so. That's the first thing you're indoctrinated with from your mother's milk. Nothing over the phone, no enclosed spaces. Put the phone away, turn off the account and communicate face-to-face on short routes.
But then...
In short, you arrive and experience everyday life. Everything is possible. Dining out, driving around, sitting in shisha bars or lounging in clubs. You talk nonsense with the boys about trivial things or club stuff while smoking shisha and doing all sorts of things.
Do you also imagine playing video games on a console like the PlayStation?
Yes, there was also PlayStation. We had a party room with a huge projector back then. We played PlayStation on it, a huge music system, so a huge party room with all things, with a coffee machine, and it was huge. So it was full program. Television.
And then the day just flies by, you can't imagine. So 9 to 5, we haven't heard that already. You spend a lot of time waiting for appointments and then...
Yes, you hang around a lot.
And you're just waiting for the appointments where it eventually comes down to money?
Exactly. Or you're out with the guys when there were any events or club visits from outside. Or any people, acquaintances from the Hells Angels environment, private circles or friends. You're in Essen, and then you go to eat together, you sit somewhere, then you somehow drive to rush hour. That was a well-known strip club we frequented back then. This is also the case when visiting or depending on when you go to the store yourself to relax. You're out and about in Berlin, meeting up with colleagues and just chilling and hanging out in the club. That was the situation. When there were business appointments, you got them done and returned to the site, as you mentioned.
Then it is the main life for you. You said if you only get up in the afternoon, life mainly takes place in the evening and at night. As you just said, you go to strip clubs or discos, celebrate, but is that always with individual people or is it also discussed in the charter?
In discos, not so much. We had a ban on alcohol in the charter, very little. You had to get permission from the sergeant, even though you didn't want to. And we were not really an alcohol, not a charter that was very, we were just, there were a few people who took any kind of narcotic things or drugs. The brother just smoked weed. But there were few people, or virtually no people, who consumed drugs or drank alcohol regularly. It was frowned upon or forbidden. They were meant to be warriors, people who could progress and think clearly. And also, not to make mistakes on the street in the name of the Hells Angels, because if they have trouble, the club is always automatically responsible to jump into the number. They didn't want to have drama over trivialities all the time. You know how people are. Alcohol, drugs, a murder case can quickly arise out of nothing. And they didn't want that back then. That changed a bit later on. But that was the approach, how one should present oneself to the outside. Sober, clearly battle-tested, and have a certain aura and equipment.
The clubhouse is the absolute center.
Yes, totally.
Now, at least superficial friendships are emerging, partly real, partly feigned, for reasons like we are all brothers.
Yes, yes.
Stay vigilant with people, as you may notice interpersonal nuances that require caution.
Yes.
And the question is, when you were there, so you had explained in a live stream at the time you were 40 members for a while.
Yes, between 40 and 45 with all the features.
That's already where you say, okay, to have 40 names on it first. 40 surnames, 40 times the age. Can one even...
40 times the potential to be infiltrated. 40 times the potential to be infiltrated.
What information is retained about a member after they leave? So...
Nothing at all. You know so little. So the only parent I really got to know was the president's father back then. God rest his soul. He died during my active time in 2013 and the maternal side. Otherwise, I didn't really get to know anyone deeply, be it where you say, okay, these are the roots, this is the family circumstance, except maybe the wife and the children, but they had also already been completely taken over by the club. But really where you say, I know the parents, or that's where he grew up.
What do you actually know about yourself then?
Nothing at all. About oneself?
No, also about the others.
Nothing at all.
Did you visit each other's homes?
No.
Did you know where everyone lived?
Not everyone.
How they live, how they exist?
No. That's intense, isn't it, for this intensity? It also shows that it has no root, really no depth at all. So it's really, you hang out so much together and are together 24/7 and pretend to be forever and brotherhood and go to prison and do other things for the club and for the brother, and then you don't even really know where he lives, what his circumstances are. With the one I got to know, who was still a prospect in my time, we were invited to a barbecue. His family did a little something. He lives somewhere in the direction of Adlershof on the outskirts. But that was the only time, that was it. Otherwise, it was always the women with the children. But that is also, yes, one can say deeply with the children. But the women have been very much incorporated by the club and are partly also part of the club, more or less, from the mindset and also from this whole situation. The aura is then just, but you didn't know the grandparents, the parents, and the other brother of him and of those where he lives. I still remember once there was a summons for me. I drove around Berlin for a while without a driver's license, and they somehow didn't have an address or something. Somehow it was like that. They knew I was a prospect and hang around, so they went to the club and said, here, this is for your friend. For Kassra and so on. They took it and asked, who is Kassra, dude? Yeah, like, who is Kassra? Yeah, we don't know him and stuff. He says, this is your brother here. That's the Persian. His name is Kassra. Okay, intense. That was 2011, 2012.
Oh God, how superficial.
Yes, of course. Oh yes, sure. That's not just superficial. That's almost like, I don't know what to say about that. And so that's how it was there. Partly really very, sure, you got to know the other's brother or this and that, but it's not just superficial. It had, yes, when you think about how close you should actually be and somehow you were, anything else would be a lie. As close as you supposedly were, you were just as distant again. So very paradoxical.
Because outwardly, brotherhood is always talked about, and you would expect to know the other person if you're supposed to serve jail time for them. The message that individuals should accept the consequences of their actions and serve their prison sentence has always resonated with me deeply, even in live streams.
You want it to be cool, to be awesome.
Yes, so those unfortunately make me smile because people can't process that at all. 10 times 25 years down just from today, we're talking...
Yes, or when they say, yes, you chose this life. Okay, so are we not allowed to reflect or change in some way? So you're never allowed to change. You must stay in that life forever because you can't change. It's always like this when the shit hits the fan. Of course, when there's a murder, you must understand it isn't clean and you have to get out. But you knew. Yes, of course, but you also have blinders on. You're completely taken in by the structure. Everything is always great. It only changes when you're really affected yourself. It's all very selective. You really have to give the other person some air and try to put yourself in their shoes, even as a layman out there. Otherwise, you won't gain any understanding at all.
So the Clubhouse, an absolute center. Otherwise, when you're private, you're almost by yourself and only with your family, your children, and so on.
If so, then yes.
Clubhouse, the headquarters. And in the evening, when it comes to, okay, we're leaving the Clubhouse, my dog here, Rudolph, he's sneaking around like a night watchman. He's just waiting for a little something out there, so bear with us. Rudolph here, the sergeant. But then it's still about, at some point, you also want to leave the Clubhouse. Is it also about showing presence?
Yes, definitely. You're bringing up a good point. There was a time after a certain phase, first half or beginning of 2013, it was said, we are doing bar tours. I had also expressed this in court. It was also about showing presence. It was about the definition of showing presence. And I said, yes, there are bar tours. There was always a member who was responsible for an intermediate hour on that day. They had to go to Neukölln, to Charlottenburg, to Märkisches Viertel, and somewhere to East Germany, to the eastern area. That means somewhere Hohenschönhausen or Marzahn, somewhere in that direction. He looked for a bar with club colors. That means t-shirt, jacket, depending on, so not a vest, and sat down there and simply showed the people we are active in this region. We are present. We sit down here in the bar. We did that very often, always on Fridays or Saturdays, always for an hour.
Is this about having fun?
No, it's a mandatory program. It's a mandatory program from the club's side. They just wanted to be visible to everyone else. Especially in the time after the ban, it was important that all our competitors understand we are here and not in small numbers. So that no one gets the idea, now they are banned, look, they are falling apart, let's try our luck on the field here and there. And they simply wanted to prevent that. And they did that quite successfully. It never came to anything. And they wanted to establish themselves in individual regions.
What sets us apart is that we focus on having fun on weekends, sitting together, celebrating, going places, and inviting people over. We have...
Yes, it was no different for us. It was the same. We also went here and there together, had fun there, as I said, had service together, not to take advantage of any services of women, but just to have fun, a massage, sit together. We did do that. We did a lot of activities together, went to the cinema, went to the restaurant, sat there in the community. Every now and then we visited the nomads, but that was at most very little because the relationship was simply completely cooled down. Outsiders, including well-known figures from the nightlife and criminal world, were also involved. There were various overlaps and mutual visits.
Relatively unspectacular during the week?
As long as nothing happens, yes.
As long as nothing happens.
Yes, and that can never be completely ruled out.
If something happens, what's the best way to communicate? Like a phone chain or WhatsApp group?
Yes, back then it was still the time of iPhone 4. For all the young viewers, there once was an iPhone 4. We are now, where are we? Almost at 16, right?
Yes, the 16 is coming out now.
And that was the time. There was also WhatsApp back then, of course. And it's not that long ago, 10 years, but yes. Then there was a message, everyone to the Clubhouse, everyone come. Or a text message as well, immediately drop everything. For example, if there was something going on, and that happened quite often.
What kind of things happen then?
Someone was attacked, or there was a confrontation with some other people from other structures, always such incidents, or if someone has an accident or something, but just because someone has a dispute or has an appointment, a conversation, a clarification talk or something, then the whole charter is not activated. But then the situation became acute, as the police say. Danger and delay, action was necessary. But I have also experienced this quite often.
Then it's funny, I always have to make a shortcut. We had to take a shortcut because the dogs went wild. We had a short visit here, and then the dogs went crazy because they were so happy.
And then that threw us off a bit.
Everything's wonderful. That's why we're pushing it back now, but it's live and we're not reshooting, it's just as it happens. You also went to Artemis, you got massages, spent time there. It wasn't just about that.
You just lived day by day unless you had any appointments or any trips abroad. We frequently traveled to Scandinavia, both together and individually. Or to Frankfurt or wherever. And so was the day, so it was actually very, very, very simple, always very repetitive, apart from all the situations that then happened. But that was the process itself. Clubhouse, sitting there with the people, letting the day pass, getting things done, spending money, going out to eat and then back again.
You also did longer tours with the motorcycle.
The longest was, they say in our charter, or in the former charter which I belonged to, why don't they say that anymore? It was just that they always said they wouldn't ride a motorcycle there at all. I can't confirm that. On the contrary, they were very keen that all people who have the opportunity also ride a motorcycle. And the longest tour we had was to the last World and Euro Run, which are now always combined, still to this day. And that was in 2013. It was in Hungary on Lake Balaton. We blasted down from Berlin all the way to Hungary on Lake Balaton. There was really bad weather at times. Partly with a few cars because of those who weren't allowed to ride the motorcycle, but the rest really did. 30 men then rode down on the motorcycle, and then we went the route in a pack. We pulled it through. We found a place somewhere in the Czech Republic where a club member, a club brother back then, organized a hotel, and from there we continued the next day.
Does this riding in a pack do something to you?
Yes, it is indeed a show of power. So it's really bold outwardly. You're celebrating the community outwardly. And very structured, very militarily built. Everything is very orderly, so it does something to you, yes.
Let's get to that quickly. How should we picture you riding motorcycles in the city? I'm having trouble visualizing it.
So I wasn't allowed to drive that day. I had a Range Rover, someone else drove it. I wasn't allowed to drive at that time, but I drove in Hungary, yes. But I didn't drive the route there.
But what I can't imagine at all, now that I've gotten to know you a bit, Kassra and screws on the motorcycle, or Kassra and cleaning the motorcycle.
Nothing at all, not at all. Zero nada.
Zero interest in motorcycles too?
Zero, no, that was just... Yes, you kind of slide into it, because everyone is somehow into motorcycles, or someone buys a Night Rod Special, a V-Rod, a Sports Star, a Fat Boy or whatever. There are countless models of Harley, you kind of get into it. You then gain a certain understanding of exhausts, handlebars, the differences between the models, but that was never really my thing. So I didn't join the club because I absolutely wanted to ride a motorcycle. They could have also warned that with them it's all about everyone driving Maseratis or something similar. Yes, if it was a Maserati, I would have been more interested in the car than the Harley. But that's how it was, and many were into the topic, not so much me, but I knew the basics.
Now let's get to it. We had it in the series already, but give us an insight into such a meeting. How is such a meeting opened? How does it work? How do people talk? What topics are discussed?
Well, there are, of course, different perspectives. There is the one of a member, which means he also participates in the meeting himself. Then there is the prospect status, which is the second candidate level, and then the first candidate level, which comes first, is the hangaround. There are no meetings in the sense that they are allowed to participate in a member meeting, it's clear. But there is still a member who holds a meeting with them separately, along with the hangaround and a prospect, and gives them the information that is relevant to them or that they need to know in order to do certain things. As a member, I believe it's also the most engaging for people initially. The sergeant or meet sergeant always leads the meeting. Usually our sergeant led the meetings. If he was absent for reasons like trips, the president appointed someone else as the meeting sergeant for that day. And then the individual officers are called up with their topics and things are discussed. First, the president starts, then the vice president, then, depending on the situation, the treasurer, secretary, usually then the sergeant in the third row.
But what does such a president address? What topics?
Yes, there are various things like charter, this and that person have contacted me. There was an incident here and there. We now have the run is ahead, take care of it, take care of this and that, deal with the treasure in report, then pass on your names for a hotel booking, whatever, there are various possibilities. And the sergeant makes sure that the meeting runs properly first, then he addresses topics that, for example, have not worked so well. If prospects have not gone so well, there are always sponsors, that is, people who are then responsible for introducing the prospect to this club life. They are then at least a year, then as long as he is a prospect, he is assigned to this member. And then, of course, he first says, hey, this and that does not work. Why not? What is the problem? Take care of it and back and forth. Otherwise, we have a problem with you, as you're responsible for the prospect. We can't expect him to know everything we introduce him to. And of course, he also gets one on top. It goes down like that in such things. When is the Germany meeting? Who is participating? Payments, etc. Email traffic. It's important to remember that Hells Angels is an international club and a registered trademark. Even the death head and such is registered and secured. And accordingly, everything is organized. So we got emails from America, he's out, we have an anniversary party, all brothers are invited to the party, come to the party, and so on. Hells Angels are present globally on every continent except likely North Korea. And yes, so they are there at the start.
But are you then asked, when it now means, here, what do I see? Mohammed 81, Paris celebrates, does any one of you want to go?
Yes, but only if you are closely connected to it and have topics. We wouldn't visit every charter just for a party. Especially not our charter. We didn't feel like dealing with those people for the most part. But if we were on good terms with them, which was the case with North Rhine-Westphalia and Frankfurt at times, within Germany, then of course we went there.
Do you go to a Christmas party like the ones Frank Hanebut always used to host?
Not necessarily, no. The relationship was at best frosty. At that point, the situations with Kadir and his brother and Frank Hanebut and so on had already happened. We've dealt with that story, so it doesn't have to be a big name for us to go. It's more about the relationship and the connection we have.
Okay. What's the tone like in such a meeting? Is there ever any shouting, or is it more like, okay, we all respect each other here?
In the charter meeting?
Yes.
No, it can explode sometimes, but for the circumstances, for the characters that are running around, it's actually not bad. Sure, you can exchange views and say, hey, I don't see it that way, but it was mostly Kadir who decided, so there were no real disputes that I noticed. Only as an outsider back then, as a prospect, where a member was kicked out, for example, and then ran out of the clubhouse, or another hang-around or prospect who took a hang-around's motorcycle and ran away. After the meeting, I had no more stakes in it. I waited in the club myself. And they then came back from the meeting and such things. So it's not like that now. Yes, it's always dependent on the situation.
Was it then addressed, this and that person still has debts at the club?
Yes, of course. But they don't do that in the meeting. There is a treasurer for that. He has to take care of it.
Does he then approach you?
Exactly. He then just gets a directive, hey, watch out, how much money do I have? Okay, why is there so little money in there? Yes, how many outstanding? Yes, then take care of it. That's not acceptable. Club fees are necessary for us to finance ourselves.
Once people have been admitted, once that has been decided, where do the patches come from? Can each charter obtain patches individually, or is there a central organizer in Germany responsible for ensuring uniformity across the patches?
Yes, so for us it was like this. We had a good contact in Graz, a club brother, his father and son. One of them, the son I believe, is now in jail himself based on the last information I received. And they sent them to us. They also had them printed for us and sent them to us from Graz. How other charters handle it, similarly or differently. We had a contact in Graz who called and sent us around 50 or 60 patches. For extraordinary items like the hardliner, which was rare, they had it printed, made, or embroidered for us. And then it was also sent to us. It was then also changed in color. The product was initially black and white, but people thought it looked like a 50 view. It was later changed to red and white.
Who reports there and says that?
Other members. And then there is a vote. They say this is not acceptable. It is somehow suggested that it would be like 50 view. And then you allow yourself your own patch and so on. And then it is no, this is also in America. Yes, it doesn't matter. We are here in Germany. And then a compromise was found. And it was said, okay, then we will change that. But it was really until the end. And then it was made red and white. But just to say, okay, good, all clear, we don't want to stress with the guys, or before this becomes a nationwide topic in the Germany meeting, because you can't always assert yourself there, even if it has broken down in the end, and there are always camps up to today at most. But Kadir didn't want to mess with the Hells Angels. That would have been nonsense. And therefore, okay, then we make a compromise, then we leave it as it is. That's why it also exists in North Rhine-Westphalia now. There are one or two candidates who wear the hardliner, but without black, white, or red, white.
You've now mentioned Euro Run or World Run. What is the purpose behind it, and how does such a meeting proceed?
Well, it's about the club coming together, everyone seeing each other, creating a community there, and all brothers in spirit meeting there, exchanging ideas, and simply strengthening the club. There is a huge merch department, a merch corner, where really all charters have the opportunity to sell things they have printed themselves. It's like a fair, but only for Hells Angels. There are, depending on which country is hosting it, I have experienced two, one in Graz, so Graz in Austria for the viewers, and one in Hungary at Lake Balaton, and the one in Graz, for example, was different than the one from Hungary at Lake Balaton. The one in Graz was much better, for example. There, a huge hall is rented, a huge catering service. For 3 days you can eat as much as you want, drink what you want, bottles everywhere. There are small stations, or it was a hall back then, bars, where the prospects and such have to do everything. It's distributed, or a catering service.
Who pays for that?
The charter itself does that.
Oh.
Yes, the charter has to provide that. Almost $1 million goes into it, almost. So Graz was already intense. So you have to imagine there are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the Hells Angels have around 2,500 members. If only half of them come, and that for a whole weekend, that's already a program.
But hotel and such, everyone for themselves?
Hotel and such, everyone for themselves, but food and drinks inside, all for free.
There's no well cash register or something that says here for the weekend?
Yes, of course, sure, but it is used for something else.
Okay.
So it's not like that. Every charter has to see what it does. Of course, it can also apply for funds, but usually the charter has to be set up. Others also apply, asking to do the same at their location. Usually it's not individual charters, but the whole country. This means all Austrian Hells Angels gather, discuss, and organize financial resources from club funds. A single charter doing it wouldn't be sustainable. So one or another charter, yes, but there are also some that wouldn't have the possibility to do so.
But are things also discussed there?
Yes, of course. Club business or charter businesses between individual charters. Then there is always a Germany meeting, and then a Europe, and then an international meeting with delegates, and of course also among each other. Business talks, there is everything possible.
How did you find these meetings?
Yes, it is already. Actually, it's like when you look at it from the outside and then come in and just look at it, it's actually like a big city festival. Except that there were 2 or 3 locations where you could use the services of prostitutes for free. But otherwise, it all feels like a city festival. Food, drink, there's a bit of entertainment, there's a huge bar area, live music, and more or less for free. All you can eat, all you can drink. With the prostitution offer there, sex opportunities with recruited women.
Everyone there already pays attention to their position, so who is important, who is with whom?
Yes, but that's interpersonal. The run itself is not the focus. Instead, people are observing the interpersonal dynamics and alliances between charters. There are various charters with their own topics. They don't see each other frequently. Not everyone always comes to the Germany meeting. Nope. Not everyone is always present. Some charters only send one member, but they are not fully engaged themselves. Even the relevant personalities, they don't feel like it. So that can also happen. So that doesn't always mean just because Neumünster, Lübeck is there, but the Tudel hasn't gone there for 3 to 4 years. Tudel was the president of the Hells Angel chapter in Lübeck at the time. There was always a single leader, such as a sergeant. That already has a different quality than if the president himself comes, things like that.
Sometimes I can sit down and listen to everything, but...
Yes, but that will also get boring at some point. That's how it's suggested.
Our difference is also clarified there.
Yes, for example. That's why meetings are also very important. The problem is presented by the charter, and then there is a vote on whether it was a mistake. And if it was a mistake and it was accepted, it's about determining the penalty. What is the punishment? What happens best? That's why it takes 1 or 2 years until somehow... No, I've figured it out myself, dude. I completely lost track of the movie. I just had a glitch in the Matrix. Yeah, totally, dude.
Should I keep it running, or do you want to take a short break again?
No, catch me up real quick. Where was I just now? My mind just completely shut off as if you just pressed the button. I don't know why I said 1 or 2 years right now.
I can ask you again. Our difference is being clarified there.
Yes, exactly. It typically takes 1 or 2 years to properly clarify and solidify things together in a sustainable manner.
Are differences also resolved at such a world run or Euro run?
Yes, they sometimes are. And then sometimes charters are drawn to sit at the table, who haven't had anything to do with each other for a year or two and maybe weren't so represented at the run, who are then also there on site, and then say, okay, now we sit at the table, and then the head of the charter meets with another head, a president or usually the sergeant, and then it is clarified at the table. It has to be clarified then.
For the good of the club?
Excuse me?
For the good of the club?
It has to be this way. It can't continue and mustn't get out of control. Things changed with Heigen-Muchuk. It was a presidential case where charter was shooting at charter in Frankfurt in the Hessian charter. And of course, that should not happen. But of course, with such characters, with such types of characters, it is difficult in the long run not to be at odds. It then escalates. That's why it was always said, okay, we have to clarify everything among ourselves. And actually, that shouldn't be the case. No brother should be actively attacked unless one has the release from the charter and the guy has received the status. So there was a case in North Rhine-Westphalia. It was about a guy named Taki. It was in 2013 at a Germany meeting as well, and the charter he was in, I think Duisburg, I don't remember anymore, they had several charters. They just beat him up without a vote, without anything. It was said that they had found a file where he had testified, and then they put him on an out-of-bed sending and just beat him up without really coordinating it. Exactly. He belonged to another charter, and then they attacked him because the charter had information and they were somehow closely related. So very confusing. A member was attacked based on an unproven accusation, and the charter had not yet provided clarity on the issue. He was physically attacked and wanted to return to the club. Django was the topic then, and he was upset they no longer followed the rules. Django, press spokesman for the Hells Angels, a member of the motorcycle scene for decades, a special Hells Angels member. And there was a huge mess. That was also a topic at the meeting, and there are many, many topics on the table, mostly international, very heavyweight topics as well. So then everyone worldwide sits at the table with delegates and they have to discuss all the topics. Development, structure of the club, openings, blessings of individual charters. Then it is said the charter must be closed because they can no longer guarantee it. So very development strong, just such structure strong decisions are made specifically. So no one is now saying we're killing him now and then something like that, as some people might imagine. That's not going to happen, but it's more organizational development and positioning worldwide then. So not regional anymore, but international.
And if two charters have beef with each other, does someone then take over the mediation in the middle, so to speak?
Yes, exactly. Does he listen to that? Exactly. There is then a mediator, and they listen to it, and then there's an agreement. And then you still have to meet in the middle.
What kind of consequences can this have up to dissolution?
Yes, if it's really intense, yes. Of course, it depends on what's at stake. It depends. It can be little things between he owes me money, he ripped me off, or we wanted to do business, he didn't pay me properly. He has a police history and is an informant, he testified. That's why the spectrum is so wide. There are then penalties. So you agree on an amount, on a territory, on a corner, on a business, whether it's true or not, that you say, okay, he has to get out. No, he doesn't have to get out. The charter will not be dissolved. Yeah, there's a wide range of possibilities that are given, what you discuss and what kind of construction sites there are, but a lot can happen, yes. From small decisions, small in the sense of when you say, hey, he's owed me something for half a year, I'm still missing 50,000. Yes, okay, that can be clarified. If you prove it, then you can agree on 35, for example, and then you have an agreement. As well as, of course, charter dissolution and individual members who are really put on out because the charter resists all the time and others say, no, he has to get out because, and then that is agreed upon.
Are there also people who really let themselves go and party hard and so on?
Yes, of course, sure. Not everyone was like us. So young, chic, and old fighters. There are many old rockers among them, many real boozers. So really, just as you imagine. Rocker-like, very numerous, not scarce. We were rather the minority in part, with the Danes together, with the guys from North Rhine-Westphalia who were a bit on a different film, and Australians, but otherwise there was also a lot of live music, rock music, and yes. That's why I say the difference was that Graz was very clean and chic, while Balaton was more rural, not as chic, and leaned more towards the rocker style. More happened there. People flew through the window. I still remember the Danes, two lawyers from the Danes back then. I think they were Aarhus or Copenhagen, the Charter Copenhagen, not the Nomads. They were so drunk, one prospect gave the other such a punch, he flew through the window because he punched so hard. They were also thrown out later, and yes, there are a few things that are very wild, but mostly it's really rocker-like.
Do you discipline yourself?
They have to.
Mutually among each other?
It's embarrassing. The exceptional position, as I said, is fundamental, and that's not possible at all. Nothing should happen externally.
We now have a mediator in the middle again. How should we imagine such world rules from the Hells Angels? Is there a Hells Angels world book?
Yes, there is the Black Book. All the rules are in there. From how a charter, the rules that a member may bring, what he is not allowed to do, no cooperations, no one may have worked for the state apparatus, must never have made a statement to the police, must never have been an employee. You also need 5 members who can found a charter. Then there is the rule, no monkeys in the club. The question has already been asked by many people. This is not my rule, again important, yes, this is also not my attitude. The club is just in a time, so anyway, everything from the club, I'm out of there, but they say so, monkeys in the club. This is very derogatory for people of color, so that was very important to me. The club was, of course, also founded in the 50s. We all know the history of American civil rights or lack of rights for black people.
I even believe in the 40s, right?
In the 40s, yes, 40s, 50s. No civil rights for blacks, black schools, black benches, white benches, restaurants for blacks, restaurants for whites. They had no rights at all, nothing. They were really fair game for the police and the state. And for people in certain regions of America, it was even worse, especially in the South back then. But generally, black Americans were known as third, fourth class people, and accordingly, the club was also set up like that. That means they did not consider themselves equal.
The thing with the police and so on is clear, but what other club rules are there?
Good question. I've never really read it. I've never read it 100% somehow. I've always had it in my hand.
Do you then give that to every member so they know these are the world rules?
Yes, but because in our charter, the president also did what he wanted, that was also very paradoxical. On the one hand, he wanted all people to have this club life, to have the knowledge and also to know the history, to be interested in the club, not only for the street and for being a gangster and tough and war. Hells Angels has a reputation since charter. We should also deal with the Hells Angels' existence because he already had knowledge in that regard. But on the one hand, he, of course, always made sure that not many people always know everything because then they can refer to it, you know. That is, of course, always, the people are kept a bit dumb regarding the rules. That's why he could also play wild boar with us and just throw people out.
So that no one could refer to the world rules?
Yes, no one. No one ever said, hey, we still have to vote here and so on. None of that ever happened. If you had experienced people fully familiar with all the rules, someone would have warned, hey, watch out, you can't just do that. Here I am a Hells Angel. And you also have to vote unanimously. That means it's not 60, 40, 35, 65 or so, but 100% unanimous. Otherwise, no member will be thrown out or receive a status or a consequence. Everything must always be unanimous at the member level.
I find it strange if one does not know the world rules in their entirety. I find it strange that one should comply with that.
Very paradoxical, but that's how it was.
Let's get straight to the people. Maybe a brief input so that people know what the tasks are. We have the president, of course, leading the charter.
Ultimately responsible for all aspects of the club's development. Then we have the vice president, who is his right hand. Then we have the sergeant at arms, who is responsible for discipline, compliance, and enforcement of rules for armament and also warfare. Then we have the secretary, who is responsible for correspondence between the individual charters and between the international and national level for the Germany meeting or international, the email exchange, so information about who is coming, who is going, who has been patched up with us. We have a party, okay, there and there. Then we have the secretary. He takes care of, no, where was I earlier?
At the secretary.
Exactly, then there is the treasurer, exactly. They are closely related. The treasurer also takes care of paperwork, but it's more about economics. He manages the funds, collects them. Every club member is obliged to pay a certain contribution every month. Then quarterly, semi-annually for his patch for the national treasury. If legal costs arise, charter business-wise, there again. So there's always somehow money in the topic also to pay that you may be there.
Many treasurers have also had a lot of trouble, right?
Yes, of course, money has gone missing. Where is the money? Or also often thrown into the room as an assertion without real proof, then took 2, 3 strong or lobbyist personalities in the charter and deposed him or threw him out, including presidents. So a lot has happened. Then there is the road captain. The road captain is responsible for planning, for outings, for trips, for organizing accommodations, for registration with the charters when we have driven somewhere, and takes care of everything like that so that everything works, the routes where we drive along. When we drove with the pack, that is with the group, that we also know where we are going, and not one to the left, right, and one somewhere in front. He has to organize how, who drives. That was his task. So we are actually almost done with everyone. So we have the president, vice president, sergeant, secretary, road captain, treasurer. These are the 6 officer positions.
Were they also occupied with the inner circle at your place?
Yes, all of them.
I would like to discuss a few patches.
Yes.
I must say.
Very briefly for the people, these positions. So these officer positions, not everyone gets them. Of course, you have a very big influence on the charter and a position of responsibility. That means only confidants of the president are appointed there. So it's always a sworn clique. It's not even decided just like that. That's how it was with us, for example, longtime friends who were friends since childhood, then took this outlaw club path together, this 1%er club path, the motorcycle club path, were already with the Medidos and then made the patch over. From the perspective of the Hells Angels Berlin City back then, my former charter, not just anyone could join. Becoming a road captain or a trusted member took more than a year. It wasn't about being cool or good at something. So you really need to have a certain, how do you say, stone in the board or nail in the board with the president for him to bring you to such positions.
So it wasn't about competencies?
No, it was about playing along. You must complete the task correctly. But it was more about passing balls, participating, and also feeding his young ones.
I would get a bit more specific because I think the main patches are known. So the center patch is the death hat.
Yes, exactly.
Then you have the top rocker with you of the Hells Angels.
Then the patch itself, then the bottom rocker below. It's always, we can go up from the front once, I forgot the term. Bottom rocker, top rocker, exactly. Hells Angels, the charter. Then the main patch, the patch itself, the death hat. Then you have the bottom rocker for the charter. In the past there was the country, but now, because it has been divided into clubs in Germany, they said, no more Germany, but regional cities and places. Then the place, like for example Berlin City, then the side rocker there, you can do whatever you want. Most of the time these were brother charters that one had. I don't know, Nomads, Denmark, or I have no idea, Midland or Duisburg or Oberhausen.
Are they then given away?
You get that as a gift from another charter.
That means when you are visiting there.
And if you're on good terms with them, then it's a kind of respect. Hey brother, can't you wear that? Side rocker and stuff like that. And then you put that on.
I've also seen a black and white side rocker on someone before.
Could be, yes. I don't know right now, you have to tell me what it says, then I can interpret it.
I couldn't see that clearly.
Yes, what it says is important. But of course there is also the possibility, but it's rare. Actually, it's always red and white.
The most diverse terms come up, including what the charter calls itself, the front line.
Yes, frontline is actually an award for a murder. Oh, frontline is a murder. Frontline is something completely different, yes.
Okay.
Most of the time they are friendship or brotherhood charters with whom one is good. We had a lot, many were not even worn. I always prided myself on charters and close relationships with high status club members. So a certain memory.
So you don't just put anything on there?
No, of course not. We wouldn't have chosen Bonn or something like that, you can be sure of that. If they had given us the powerful ones, we had the Nomads, Denmark, we had Australia, British Columbia, so Canada, things like that. So those were...
There was a keen interest in getting people to watch. Since we're already here, I wanted to ask you, what's the difference between Filthy Few and Frontline?
Yes, I can explain that to you. Basically, Filthy Few and Frontline are two awards, two patches, both meaning murder. The Filthy Few also has a backstory. I'll explain that first so you can understand. Filthy Few members are those who have killed for the club, on behalf of the club. And for the club? But Filthy Few includes not just the murderer, but also those involved in the murder, even if only one person committed it. Most of the time, it's just one person. And those who somehow had their part or role in the execution of the murder or in the act itself. That means drivers, scouts, procuring weapons, luring the victim somewhere, whatever. So everyone has their area of responsibility somehow. He also gets the Filthy Few. The front line is something completely different. Now qualitatively compared to the Filthy Few. The front line and American troops in Germany wear the same patches. In America it was like this, and now the story stands front line with Filthy Few. Why there are even two different ones? Because people always say why it has the same meaning. It was said, for example, the Americans have a different understanding when it comes to Filthy Few. They then also partially distributed Filthy Few only during physical confrontations to the individual members of the charter. And Denmark was a special charter back then and has a special history. Meanwhile, that has changed a lot. That no longer exists such manpower. Despite that, they have a history of being highly influential and powerful in the past. So for the club structure, they had a very high reputation because they committed a lot of wars and a lot of murders. And they then found out that in America, this Filthy Few is distributed for something that people otherwise fight for and go to jail and sacrifice themselves for the club and murder and all that stuff. They expressed concern and said the situation was unacceptable. You're distributing this for less serious crimes. And we have people here who go to jail for this and are lifelong murderers. This can't go on like this. And then the Danes decided, okay, then we'll bring our own patch, which really only means murderers. And he murdered for the club. He is the one who was on the front line. That's why front line, the one at the front who was also killed for the club, and only he.
And he is the one who shot.
There is also this warrior which used to exist, but the front line has a different quality. That person then really deliberately killed for the club. And that's why they launched this front line to kind of, for the people, I don't know, to make it more attractive or to enhance the significance a bit from their perspective.
And the difference to the warrior?
Well, the warrior was there before, it still exists. That's how it is if someone has, for Filthy Few and warrior, you know, okay, he is the one who has killed for the club and he is also the one who carried out the murder. That's the definition in between. But the Danes wanted to have their own complete patch back then. That wasn't enough for them and they wanted that, and then they brought out this front line.
You're always not allowed to... were you hot for the Filthy Few or these black and white patches?
No, that was far away. Of course, back then you saw it on such people and thought, okay, intense. They had a reputation in the club, and we thought, okay, intense, he killed for the club. Then you perceived him as a supposed person of respect, yes. But the filthy few was very distant from me.
But do you see the people who do this for the club with different eyes?
Yes, of course. I'd be lying if I said I was already critical back then. That's nonsense. These were people, you somehow looked up to them. They were very respected personalities. You were very reverent there. Especially in Denmark, there are well-known former or still active Hells Angels back then who already had a history. They lived off their deeds, lived and then also had their status in the club, of course, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day. And there you are like, okay, intense, wow.
Many who don't deal with the topic upon stumbling across such a video think,
totally sick understanding of respect and recognition, but that's very, very important for the youth out there. So this is not a healthy mindset, it's totally sick. But if you want to know how it was back then, that's also very important. So a completely good understanding of such things, but that's how it was back then. Yes, that's how it is within the club. So anything else would be a lie, everything else would be nonsense.
And then of course there is the well-known, I don't know how to pronounce it, Dequalo or...
Dequialo. I'm surprised it's Spanish, as the bandidos are influenced by Spanish, Mexican and Hispanic cultures. Because it was founded by the guys over there, more or less. But they took Dequialo. Dequialo means troublemaker, complainer. And you get that when you have deliberately injured police officers and have confrontations with police officers.
You once had a police check.
For example, I also got one, and you get it for that, confronting or fighting with police officers. Because as I said, you reject police officers and the rule of law. And there we are, like with the club topic. Not everyone becomes like that, but the patches are very specifically invented, used, and also awarded.
Were you incredibly proud of what you received?
Yes, of course. Everyone in the club defines themselves by their patches. Otherwise, one could also go to other outlaw club areas, quieter, calmer ones, where one really only wants to dig up the money. But here it's also a lot about vanity, self-presentation, recognition and respect, supposed respect, and about boosting the ego. All of that comes with it. It's wanted to stick all that crap on there and also to define, look, I've killed for the club. I wasn't just there, but I also carried it out. I'm the one who twisted his neck. That's sick because it's such a crude thing. They copied that from the military back then, where you were honored for deeds you did in service. If you, I don't know, bravery in front of the enemy or the Purple Heart for the Americans, if you were wounded in combat. With that, you're really just acknowledging what the man has done for the unit and for the country. There, they simply turned it around and said, okay, we distinguish ourselves like in the military because the club was founded by guys from the ex-military. But just such a definition from which we have already worked through the individual patches.
Who decides that you get something like that? The president?
The sergeant and the president.
And they order a patch like that?
Or just the president, depending on the situation.
And then they say?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. They order it and then you go there and pick it up. There's always someone who attests to it. That's the president. And then no one questions it and then you get it.
I still have names on here, including Master of Menace.
Something like that too, act of violence.
Also an act of violence.
The text appears to be incomplete or lacking context. I apologize, but I am unable to shorten or rephrase it while preserving its meaning accurately. It was more prevalent in Denmark than in Germany. A former member, or maybe still active, got it from the Americans. The Americans have many patches. As I've already said, sometimes there's a different understanding, but black on white or black and white patches are always a definition of a violent act. I also had Boston on here. Boston?
Yes, Boston.
I know the city of Boston, but otherwise? Yes, but also black and white. Yes, there's certainly violence, but I can't provide more context.
Then you had also said that, so a red light crew...
Exactly. Black and white has nothing to do with violence. Then such people get it, who are active in the red light district and who then also generate a lot of money for the charter in that area. The crew, consisting of several people, also receives the award. These workers in the red light district are highly profitable for the business. Then they get such a patch. The bandidos also have a similar concept called take care of business. They take care of making sure business and certain things run and check that it also works and generate money as well. It's something similar.
Then maybe a short input again. We explained in the video that 1% had already been explained.
Exactly.
That's actually already the designation outside of societal norms, 1% of mothers who are also criminals.
There's a story about that too, but it's not interesting anymore, so we don't need to tell it now.
Then the 666, is that a special distinction or just a badge?
Yes, it's this devil's definition, the 666. It's more about, well, I don't know, I could never relate to it. It's about this 666. Yes, anti-religion, anti-society, anti-Christ, something like that. Yes, that's probably what they understand by it, and that's why they made it 666.
Number of the beast.
Something like that, yes.
Then can the charter also always give away what you see there, like these badges, pins, and so on? Do you then have separate death heads because each charter has its own death head?
Yes, each charter is obligated and also entitled to create its own death head. And then it is printed and then also sent to all for the charter to attach. Then there must be approvals, and if the approval is okay, then it is their death head. And that is then the death head, which is then also given away. As a greeting, as a pin, as legitimization, to tattoo it on oneself. We already had one, but the charter always decides that.
So you can make everything yourself, like lapel pins for 5 years, 10 years?
Yes, but you have to take care of it, of course. That's where the whole creation process comes in. Someone has to draw it on commission.
So is the robe sometimes really a target for the police, or?
It's like saying, here, this is where I belong. This is me. It's like a self-imposed all eyes on me.
Then there's the saying, Alpha among the Hell's Angels.
Yes, quite a lot. I had that tattooed on my neck and on my fingers too. It's English for angel forever, forever angel. That means angel forever, forever angel. It's supposed to be a definition that I'm a Hell's Angel forever and will always remain an angel. It's also there with the bandidos, bandidos forever, forever bandidos, bandidos forever, forever bandidos, or outlaws forever, or whatever. But it doesn't really have a meaning because we also see how people change clubs. So there's nothing forever, it just looks good, instead of the definition that is lived there and that they have imposed on themselves.
I then still have the term here, again and again, that there is also a commission? Yes, a commission, like mafia structures.
Yes, there are people who have a certain position. It's like a council, it exists. They are also elected. It's like a commission, you can call it that, yes.
Who then decide the bigger things or mediate?
Yes, they decide in certain hard cases, in certain situations, in certain questions that arise now. Foundations admitting a new country that is not there yet. There is then a vote, but they are still there to finalize it in general. The commission usually always consists of 1 member per country. So it's not 3-4 people.
Do they also meet somewhere if it's something important?
Usually at the world meetings.
Okay, then I have another term, Pony Express. Does that mean anything to you?
I've never heard of that. No, pony sounds somehow like pony.
Yes, Pony, so Pony Express.
Maybe human trafficking?
No, it was defined in such a way that communication was not done over the phone, but notes were driven from hand to hand.
I see. Oh, okay, hence the Pony Express. You sure? It's also a self-setter because they only need to find out what it means once. Then they know how one communicates. Very simple, but yes, funny. I've never heard of it.
Was there something you said about not communicating, but someone having to go to Prospect with a note?
Yes, of course, sure. But then really only in certain situations, in certain hardship cases. But yes, when it came to information transfer that should not be intercepted somewhere and should be verifiable, of course. Also with other charters, we had situations where a murder contract went out against Kadir Padir. The information is then, we'll go into that topic another time. Let's just quickly look at this. Yes, internationally, and there was information from the police which was passed on to another charter. The charter met with him one-on-one and then told him, or also such information about prohibition procedures, about investigations, about ongoing or warrants lying on the table. Then you meet, and then there is a Pony Express. But there is no patch for that.
No, that was not a patch. I just said it as a term.
And I've never heard that term before. It's just a conversation between two people.
Yes, but it can also be on the internet. Feel free to write it in the comments.
Everything's fine.
But it seemed authentic to me because, of course, somehow United States of America and then somehow with car and note.
Of course, I'm speaking for Europe now, and America is very unique in many ways. They have so little knowledge sometimes of what we do here or what we did in the time I was involved, of course, even today, like the guys and how we were back then in America.
As a final topic, which I would like to come back to, I also have a question for you. Can you explain left, no contact and out in bad standings?
Yes. Left means he left the club on good terms. Everything is okay. He can come as a guest. He is a friend. You say hello to each other on the street. There is no bad blood.
May I ask something about left? With left, is it the case that if you have a Hells Angels tattoo, a left date comes out?
Yes, that's very important anyway. If you have left the club as a member for whatever reason, which is very ambivalent, the charter comes into play. And whatever situations there are, that one has decided to leave. It's not that easy. At least it wasn't for us. You are anyway obliged to blacken all club-related tattoos. For some, it was charter business. They had to either completely blacken or laser it to make it unrecognizable. For the others, it was enough to tattoo left and then the exit date underneath. For others, you only had to blacken the head of a death head, for example, so that you could see the wing but not the head anymore. The charter made that decision, but change was necessary. You were no longer allowed to walk around like that. And this is left. Of course, this applies to all other tattoos, for all others that we have. The other two. Left no contact is just, he's out. Not in the best state, but also not so that one says, okay, one has to somehow get hold of him and do something to him and make his life difficult. Club members are no longer allowed to greet or contact him. They act as if they don't know him. He's not allowed to contact us, and we can't contact him. He should move on with his life, but cross to the other side of the street. Goodbye.
Not so beautiful anymore.
No, it's just... one or two incidents occurred where they told me to leave, claimed not to know me anymore, and instructed me to stay away from them. That's the direction, where they said, well, okay, but that's just about it.
I'm sorry, my dog is howling right now because Marisa is coming.
It's like with left no contact.
Yes, that's why the dogs are freaking out when Marisa is coming right now. Then I have experienced this often. Marissa, you need to let the dogs out. Thank you. So, and I have seen this with some who have moved from left no contact to out in bad standings relatively quickly.
Yes, because afterwards probably a few things, topics came up here and there where one then said, okay, this is somehow worse than we thought. Then we go one level higher and there is actually no worse level.
What does out in bad standings mean?
Out in bad standings means that you left the club on bad terms, that the club is not interested in a good relationship. On the contrary, the club members have been given the free choice to physically attack you and even kill you. Everyone can decide that for themselves. And you are actually fair game outlawed. And every club member is not obligated. One can interpret it now. We are talking about other charters now. The charter are, yes, those who have decided the out in bad standings. Yeah, but other charters now, let's say in other regions, in other countries, get to know about it and then have the opportunity to actively go against you. That means to seek your life, to beat you up, to threaten you and everything else, to make your life difficult in any way possible. And this can range from killing to physical confrontations by attacking you, beating you up. If you see me on the street, that you don't let me walk, that you are threatened, your family is threatened. So they are allowed to do that. So they don't always have to call the charter, hey, he's walking around here, but they are allowed to do that. They would have the freedom to do so. But with most, with most fans, it's like that. Other charters don't want to interfere in others' charters, and then they also don't want to take over their construction sites.
Well, I think
they think it's more their business, they've chosen it, then they should also implement it. Just because someone else sees it differently based on their charter, it's not our concern. Because we also don't want to press our fingers. I do this for others. They don't know what happened there. Of course, they should say, okay, get rid of him. Yes, so don't say hello, and so no contact at all, for God's sake. But in most cases, it is so that they maybe say, okay, watch out, we saw you here or something, but there is no charter or something.
I think they say nothing because then others could ask why you did nothing.
Exactly, that could, of course, also happen.
Rather ignore.
It can also happen that you are seen, that you are asked, what's going on now? Why is he out? What is the situation? He was at the police and testified. All of this has to be taken into account. So it's not just, why aren't you doing anything? You have to look at the situation, because the charter doesn't want to unnecessarily bring any construction sites into the house, and also doesn't want to take on other people's problems.
Yes, well, I would also say
you shouldn't underestimate that the charter could say, okay, go shoot him down. As I said, it's a difficult situation and anything can happen. Excuse me.
No, it is. I can only imagine it, if someone says, just from my now regained somewhat normal common sense.
I would definitely say very healthy.
If someone in Untertupfingen, 497 miles away, has charter problems with someone in bad standing, and they're 497 miles north of me, and I'm supposed to beat or kill them, I'd be in prison for 20, 25 years for that.
Yeah, you really have to want that, right? Definitely, so that's very difficult.
I would say that a person with whom I never had anything, who never did anything to me, I would say I didn't see him.
Yeah, one does it like this. Of course, there are also people who don't think like that at all. On the contrary, who don't have these cognitive abilities to differentiate and somehow play out the consequences for themselves. Where is the added value? But there are also some who have a different perspective. Yeah, the added value for them is the patch, cool. Someone from the club who has a bad reputation, and that's how he earns his laurels. But one must not forget, it is always a directive from the president. You must not forget, when you commit such things, it always falls back on the charter. The charter suffers directly, participates, and of course suffers from every action of the individual members. When someone commits a murder without consulting the leadership, the situation can quickly spiral out of control and have severe consequences for the perpetrator. Of course, if someone gets killed, the police come, and then it's also the end of the party for a while. And in many regions, the police are not as active to such an extent as we are. They are active, pursuing their philosophy and methods, similar to our past approach of frequent checks, pressure, and thorough observations. When present at shops, we warn that allowing them back in will result in the shop, trade office, and more being torn apart. Checks, I'll make your business difficult, something like that. They don't say that, but that's the intention behind it. So they control everything possible with permissions, security, and 34A. Destroy everything. So they take everything apart. The tax office comes and you don't feel like dealing with that. And I think that's right. That's also this maximum pressure, 1,000 pinpricks. But not every state is like that. And we've also discussed this together in a stream before. And therefore, of course, you quickly bring problems into the house that you didn't actually want. So from that point of view, it always depends. But the experience I've had, we were the minority, this charter, also war charter, and yes, this exorbitant violence that emanated from the charter for a certain period of time was very exotic, very special, and most charters are not so massively on the move. So to this extent, they are on the move. There is also killing, there is also violence, but in this abundance and in this structured violence, it was very extraordinary, very unique, and of course completely out of order. I can't imagine other presidents would agree to such a request. I think it's cool to get the police here now and ruin the business of my 3 brothels by having them stand out front. Just because some prospect thought he could suddenly earn the member patch by killing for the club and then filthy view again. And unasked, I can't imagine that.
That hurts the business. Exactly. Kassra, thanks for the insight into this world. I'm happy for you that it's over, that you've arrived in your new life. We will certainly meet again somehow. Check all this out from Kassra, including his book, The Persian, and of course his channel, which is linked below, also triggered by sequence. Everything is linked under the video. Check it out.
Upcoming podcasts, exactly.
So thank you very much for your time, for this insight into such a life, a very special life. I can only recommend it to everyone. Guys, if you're trapped somewhere, there's always a way out. Exactly.
Exactly.
And just try to manage the downturn.
Exactly.
So thank you very much, my dear. And then thank you to all channel members. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Feel free to comment. Check it all out. As always, I bid you ahoy from the coast.
This time in sync.